I am Noah Shea, alum and grad assistant of LaSalle University's Solstice of Master of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program. Welcome to the second in a series of 8 evening readings taking place here in Auburndale, Massachusetts, as part of our July 2025 10-day residency, the start of our fall semester. For tonight's reading, first up, we will have the Founding Director, Meg Kearney, who will be introduced by alum Ellen Austin Lee. Then we will have faculty member Laura Williams McCaffrey, introduced by Writing for Young People student Caroline Osborne. And we'll conclude with a guest faculty member, AC Gaughen, who will be introduced by Writing for Young People student Aislinn Fair. Ellen, come on up to the mic.
Hello, everybody. Is this good? I'm not sure. Okay, thank you. This is fine. This is good. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start with a bit of a poem. And what emotional impulse leads you to speak of the heart? That cliche, its chambers for sleeping. I'm going to start over. And what emotional impulse leads you to speak of the heart, that cliche, its chambers for sleeping, for weeping, and remember the chamber for repair? Of course you do. Something's always broken, in need of glue. These lines from Meg Kearney's sonnet, Harp Quartet, capture the essence of Meg's voice, clear-eyed, caring, witty, intelligent. They appear in her forthcoming heroic crown, Cardiac Thrill, from Green Linden Press, where her previous heroic crown, The Ice Storm, is in its 3rd printing. Her poetry collection, All Morning the Crows, was a winner of WordWorks Washington Prize and nominated for a pushcart. But before I say more, let me introduce myself. I'm Ellen Austin Lee, a 2022 poetry alum. And it's my honor to introduce Meg Kearney, the founding director of the Solstice Low Residency Master of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program at LaSalle University. Before I highlight Meg's literary achievements, I must mention her leadership. Good leaders may boast of their accomplishments, but great leaders aren't compelled to tell you about them. Great leaders model humility, and this is what I've seen in Meg Kearney. Meg doesn't hold herself above others. She treats everyone, from literary stars to beginning writers, as creative peers, and instills this egalitarian spirit in the Solstice community. Prior to founding Solstice, Meg was associate director of the National Book Foundation and taught at the New School. Her poetry collection, Home by Now, was the winner of the Penn New England L.L. Winship Award, a finalist for the Patterson Poetry Prize, and Forward Magazine's Book of the Year. She also authored An Unkindness of Ravens, and a trilogy of verse novels for teens that are on the table, I believe. And Meg's picture book, Trooper, won many honors, such as the Kentucky Bluegrass Award and an award from the Missouri Association of School Librarians. Meg's poems have been featured on Poetry Daily and Garrison Keillor's A Writer's Almanac, and have appeared in many places, including Best American Poetry. From Meg's sonnet, Magpie. But tell me this, if they all play it safe, simply wait for an end to the flood, then who else will sing the song of witness? Who else indeed? Please help me welcome Solstice's songbird, Meg Kearney.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Ellen has become a dear friend, and I admire her so much as a poet too. And she also now has a heroic crown of sonnets, as does Quentin Collins. It's kind of like this disease going on. And it's funny because Quentin said the other day, because I just got the Unbound galley for Cardiac Thrill that's coming out in September. And he goes, "How about a triple crown?" Oh my goodness, I wasn't thinking of writing another one, but now the wheels are turning already. But speaking of Quentin, I wanted to start with one of his poems. And I was going to print it out, and then I thought, oh, the book will be here. And it's from his first book. And it's not on the table. I encourage you to buy his second book, which is. But this is Quentin. I won't read it as well as he would, but it's not only quintessential Q. It's a poem for the day that we're living in now. And it just shows you, this was in his creative thesis when he was a student. Okay. And it's the title poem of his first book, The Dandelion Speaks of Survival. When they see me rise, a nebula of coronas, sunburst spires strewn among their bluegrass lawns, they will come for me. When my roots fan a maze around their chrysanthemums, interlace a cage around their petunias, grab the life I'm so often denied, they will come for me. They will come for me when I yawn from a driveway fissure, when my leaves sprawl over their gravel beds. They will come with hands clenched, garden shears to snap their jaws, weed whackers to split my body, chemicals that wither and disintegrate me. They will come with mower blades sharp, the thunder of gasoline combusting in the engine. They will come with tillers and hoes and rakes and knives and torches. Don't they know that when the wind rocks my halo, I cast seeds into the sky? I clutch earth tighter than English bluebells. I survive their hands and their instruments. I survive every way they spill my bitter milk. I survive, I survive, I survive, I survive again and again when they sharpen new tools, arm themselves with professional grade sprays, call landscapers to scrape out my existence, call me weed, call me nuisance, call me pest, say I am not welcome, poison the soil to stunt my growth. Know that I survive. I spring forth a field of gold. My petals kissed by morning dew. I bloom like the sun spills over the horizon. I stretch my stem and roots beyond all borders. I split their concrete and this earth. Right? Oh my goodness. We need Quentin Collins in the world. It almost makes me want to cry. Okay, now I'm going to read a poem for Maurizio, who's been out there today videotaping the squirrel who carried some hummus up into the tree. And then later he brought the hummus down out of the tree and was getting it all over his nose while he ate it. I've actually seen twice squirrels eating a mouse. I always thought they were vegetarians, but they are not. This is called Carnal, and it has a line by Donald Hall. Carnal. I suppose squirrels have their hungers too, like the one I saw today with the ass end of a mouse jutting from its mouth. I was in the park. I'd followed the stare of a dog marveled as the dog seemed to marvel that the squirrel didn't gag on the head. Gulped so far down the squirrel's throat, nearly all that was visible was the gray mouse rump. Its tail, a string too short to be saved. The dog and I couldn't stop gawking, and the squirrel looked stunned himself. The way my ex, the big game hunter, looked when I told him I was now a vegetarian. We'd run into each other at a street fair in Poughkeepsie. The hot dog he was eating rose in his hand, pointed like a stubby finger, accused me of everything I'd thought I'd wanted and what I'd killed to get it. Thanks. I'm so glad, Ellen, that was such a beautiful introduction. Thank you. And I'm glad that you read that beginning from Heart Quartet, so this new heroic crown of sonnets, I wasn't going to read from it, but after taking Doug's class today, marvelous class on forms, and we talked about American sonnets that Terrence Hayes kind of started us all off on. I'm more of a traditionalist when it comes to sonnets, but I thought, all right, I'm going to read some sonnets tonight. And I'll just read a couple that last summer these were like brand new. So they've been tweaked a little bit before they made it into the chapbook. But what Ellen read, this is actually like a heroic crown is 15 interlocking sonnets, right? So you have sonnets 1 through 14. The last line of the first sonnet becomes the first line of the second sonnet. The last line of the second sonnet is the first line of the third, and so on. And then sonnet 15 is made of lines 1 of sonnets 1 through 14. Yeah, it's really a crazy word puzzle. So what I did with this one, though, there's a prologue poem called Heart Quartet, which is what Ellen read from. And they all have like a heart theme. And cardiac thrill is well, I think it's actually in here. The definition of cardiac thrill. When a murmur is more noticeable, the provider, the doctor, may be able to feel it with the palm of the hand over the heart. This is called a thrill and means the murmur is grade 4 or higher. And you can actually hear one of those murmurs. So I'm going to just read 2 of these. And this is sonnet 1 and 2. And I wanted to read these in particular for Pope Leo, even though we don't mention Pope Leo. It's just so strange to me that I've been like thinking and reading up on popes for this other book that I'm writing. And then they made it into this heroic crown. And then we had like lots of Pope stuff going on with Francis dying and Pope Leo and all the, anyway. So this first one is called Surprise. So this is the first of the 14, 15. Surprise. Like God, the heart adores a good surprise. Imagine Eve's heart, its great leap of joy when the growing belly did not destroy the new young woman body. It realized instead that the belly had ceased to rise, as it meant to spill a life, spill a boy, dear God. Then, in a few years, another boy, 2 hearts, one made to love, one to despise love, though Eve in her heart didn't know this yet. Cain's heart was the first to turn to rot. In book 2, the birth of Jesus Christ led to Herod, then Judas Iscariot. But God won't guard you just because you're pious. Even the Pope's heart attacked him in bed. And then the one that follows that, no one is spared. Even the Pope's heart attacked him in bed. No, not all popes are pious, but John Paul I, named for John 23 and Paul VI, was called the smiling Pope. and said to be gentle, kind, and open-minded. 33 days post-election came the attack, which was more like Lee at Appomattox, cut off from supplies, arteries that fed the heart blocked, and so the muscle died, starved of blood. Yet, unlike the 12-day battle, forces that take out a heart need instead just seconds before a life's unraveled. One day you're whistling, next your stone's been carved. Soup, still warm when they found grandma dead. So that's just a taste of cardiac thrill. Thank you. And I'll read a couple, I'll read the last two sonnets from The Ice Storm, which is the first heroic crown. This is about essentially about the disintegration of a marriage. And so the last two poems are kind of sum that up. And this first one is How It Happens. So this is sonnet 14. And how it happens is like, you know, how a marriage really disintegrates. How it happens. It sweeps in ruin and it comes by stealth in its silent leather jacket and its blood-stained feet. It sticks to its story of locusts and dust, sings itself to sleep after pissing on the hearth. What does it dream? Spiders and knits, tearing a photo of you into bits, wine of a dog, flesh soft as earth. Platinum, bleeding green, then scorched by fire, that's the color of the sky when it begins. It does what it likes as the rain comes lightly. Then the wind starts to whip and the stakes stretch higher. The marriage is over before the storm strikes. So this is the last sonnet in the book, and so it's lines 1 through 14 from the first 14 sonnets. Storm. The marriage is over before the storm strikes. It starts like a lullaby, innocent as rain in the forecast, in the sky, nothing but rain. But nothing's what it seems at the edges of twilight. Anger's hand clears the deck, yanks out the lights. He thinks we'll always have the weather to blame. She thinks it's just the world imploding again. By morning, the world outside the window is ice. They call a fragile peace around the wood stove. Don't say mine, don't say help, don't think you can handle this house by yourself. Further proof, he's never known her and won't. The storm takes out the poplars and sweet pine grove. It sweeps in ruin and it comes by stealth. Thank you so much. I'm going to end with a long poem from All Morning the Crows. And I was already apologizing to Ellen, like, I hope too many people haven't heard this before a million times. And she's like, we want to hear poems more than once. And I'm like, I always tell people that. It's like musicians, like you go and you want to hear like songs that you write. And the poets are always apologizing, like, I'm so sorry you already heard this poem before. So this is kind of my way of apologizing and not, I guess, at the same time. So this takes like 8.5 minutes to read. And it's Crow. And it's in 24 very short sections, so I'll just pause between each one. And, thanks again to all of you. Is that Hina? Oh my goodness. Hello. That's so great. That's so awesome. Nice. Alum. Crow. Oh, let me just say, so I'm working on this tremendous long Crows project, which it's going to be a long time before I'm ready to read from that to anybody. But I'm telling the story of my first mother. And so this is kind of like the warm up to that. This is kind of like the outline to that story. But I found out a lot of things since this was written, and some of this isn't factually accurate anymore, but it doesn't matter. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. If you're not writing nonfiction. Crow. It was a crow first taught me how to pry a thing open, snatch a stick to leverage a headstone, or widen the hole in a rotten pine's trunk to get at the story inside. New York, 1999. If our mother had kept you, my newly found sister said, you'd never have gone to college. Wouldn't have done a lot of things you've done. Ornithologists claim crows have an innate sense of fairness. One will scoff at your proffered raisin, for example, if you've given her sister 2 peanuts. If you've given her sister away, that's a fact best kept cached, like the crow's scraps of roadkill and white oak acorns. I wasn't the first apprentice to the crow. First to learn that old term, crowbar, handy for getting at grubs and slugs or warding off a man with a brick for a fist. Flip the bar around to hook a beetle, but not a mother, not a sister. If she had kept me? A rooster crows, crows caw. Explain that. And while you're at it, how you came to laugh my mother's laugh, my newly found sister said. I said, I never claimed to be anyone's interpreter. She said, our. I meant to say our mother. Rhode Island, 1960. Hear that? Crows are songbirds too, squawked the nuns in their choir loft. See the one with the little silver cross in her beak, jimmying the blue gold window's latch? That's her, my first mother. Our mother told me, my newly found sister said. She went to Catholic boarding school. I said, well, the convent. Our mother did not speak a secret language. She spoke the language of secrets. As any ex-nun will tell you, the world isn't simply black and white. Consider a plum in a crow's beak in sunlight. Consider the nun's habit sunk to its knees in the confessional's dark, color of a broken vow, iridescent as a cancer cell. Apprentice, yes, I told my newly found sister. Ravens? You have to work your way up to ravens. Corpses, cemeteries, what many people think when they hear crow, also known as the pallbearer of souls. By the time I found her, my first mother had already been dead 17 years. Why was I surprised? At her grave, I left a silver earring for the crows to find. Does anyone ever see a scarecrow and think, crow? Cornfields, maybe, or Father, is that you? If you leave us, the nuns in Bristol told my first mother, you will die a terrible death. But she stole a dress blue as a baby crow's eye, plus 500 nickels, bought a bus ticket to Boston. The dress, a newly arrived novitiate's. Crow's eye blue, code for so sexy, it was in the to be burned bin. How did she go from Boston to New York to Tucson? Why didn't she tell us about you? My newly found sister wants to know. She thinks I have the knowledge of crows. From the crow's nest of her getaway ship, my first mother could have seen nothing useful. Not the snake charmer with his charming snake, or Prince Charming, or how a daughter can shrink to a name on a dotted line, to one brown eye on the horizon before falling off the edge of her world. In Scotland, crows are corbies. Granddad never lost his brogue, my newly found sister said. She said she could still hear him singing about the twa corbies who feast on a dead knight's bonny blue eyes. When still in her sister Gabriella disguise, my first mother taught second grade. All those children, not one of them hers. Snack time milk box cost 5 cents. Added up. Fact, crows can recognize human faces, even remember them years later. The first time I saw my mother in a photograph, I thought it was some sort of trick mirror. Hello, I said. I know you. You are she when I last remember her well, my newly found sister said. No place for a ship in Arizona, meaning no daily departures leaving from Boston or New York, where I was harbored. Was that the allure? To be far from the Atlantic, its relentless chant, though the desert is its own type of sea. She was given a photograph of me to keep. Grief came in waves like the heat. On overcast days before clocks, Jews began the Sabbath when crows came home to roost. Crows don't need a timepiece. Sunsets when all the good stuff starts to happen. Arizona, 1983. This is the story I've been told with a few guesses thrown in. Round and around my first mother's deathbed, through the sisters of Bristol, that murder of crows. I have another daughter, she whispered to her husband, low, so her children wouldn't hear. He promised to find me, thinking this would make her live. Told you so, chanted the crows, settling like a wreath at her feet. How did she get to Tucson? Some say the southern route, a brand new Corvair convertible. I say she flew. Thank you.
That was wonderful, Meg. Thank you. Hi, I'm Caroline. I'm a second semester writing for young people student at Solstice. I'm really happy that I get to introduce Solstice faculty member and YA fantasy fiction author Laura Williams McCaffrey. I worked with Laura as my mentor last semester, and I think that probably anybody who's had her as their mentor would agree that her feedback is incredibly meticulous. She pinpoints exactly what your work needs, and then she extracts little threads of details that you didn't even notice, and then she just sort of lays them out in a sewing pattern that makes your brain hurt and also makes you a better writer. So I think Solstice is very lucky to have her. When Laura is at home, she writes in her witch's tower, as she has called it. And if you're familiar with her work, I think you'll know that that feels very right. Her writing is haunting and raw and eerily beautiful. And if you haven't read her work, you should. If you don't know where to begin, I'll help you out a little bit. You should definitely check out her sci-fi dystopian fantasy short story that was published last September in Clark's World called Broken. It's a real treat. So anyways, please join me in welcoming Laura Williams McCaffrey.
Thank you, Caroline, so much. It's always, I say this over and over, but it's hard to then read after you hear the introduction. Like, who is that person? I'd like to be that person. But you're such a treat to work with as well. Should I turn this up a little? Is that better? Yeah, okay. Will it stay is the question. Like, raise it, yeah. Is that good? Yeah, okay. I decided I was going to read something older. Partially based on my workshop, we talked a little bit today about how a scene or scenes need kind of an intensity, even if you don't know the backstory, that you still can kind of feel that intensity. So I decided to put my money where my mouth was and try to read something that has that to it. Marked, the only things you need to know. Yeah, need the glasses. Okay. I knew that would happen someday. So the concept in this world is that you only get to go to college if you have a patron, and you only get a patron if you really are good all the time. And the main character has kind of fallen off of that. She went to get some medicine that she couldn't get anywhere else in a place that's illegal and got caught. And she got marked, you get tattooed, and the more you get in trouble, the more you get tattooed. I really can't see a damn thing. Okay. But she's been offered a deal by the peace officers, as they're called, to spy on a childhood friend, someone she is very close to and hasn't been with for a little while. And she's taking that deal. The other thing to know is that there are comics sprinkled throughout here. This is kind of the media, they're the things they follow in this world. These kind of adventure comics starring Pirate Jackman and Lady Captain and their good friends. And these two, the guy that she's supposed to spy on, they talk to each other in kind of the language of their comic, which will come up later. So I'm going to read a little touch with her sister, and then I'm going to skip forward to scene with him. Hope, who's her sister, played a chord. She doesn't have a real piano. This is like painted on the floor of this attic that they're in. She and Lila's the main character. Look, I won't ask more about it. Just if Gil finds out you're squilling on him, he'll be really mad and upset. Lila looked at the airy wall, and Lady Captain's like a poster of her, grinning wide. So I gotta make sure, she almost said they, as in Red Fist, this kind of group they think he's a part of. Gil doesn't find out I'm squealing. This isn't a zine strip. I know that, Hope, but there were real runners during the wars like Lady Captain. The gray folks were real. Lady Captain spied on them. People do lots of tough things when they have to. I'm not saying they don't. I'm saying life isn't a zine strip. Lady Captain is going to be all right by the last page of every single story. Real runners got badly hurt all the time. I know, Hope. I'm not dumb. Would you rather I stay marked? You'll be the clean sister. I'll be the marked sister from now on. That's not what I'm saying either. When people make a mistake, which you don't, she thought, but everyone else does, they gotta fix it, so I am. Hope pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes. I know. Her shoulders rose and fell. Then she dropped her hands and sat upright in a way that made Lila think of old-fashioned dress cinches, laces pulled tight, bone stays rigid. All I'm saying is, when you're running around with Gil, don't start thinking you're only playing some game off in the woods. You won't be in the woods. You know what I mean. I can tell when I'm playing a game and when I'm not, Hope. But the two of you always used to, you'd forget everything else while you were out on your adventures. Remember that time you got home late? You didn't even realize how dark and cold it was. Your ears were frostbit. I'm not 8 anymore. Lila touched her earlobes, and my ears were only frostbit a little. They ended up fine. Before Hope could start in again, Lila said, "You're not helping. You're making me jittery." Sorry. Hope rested her hands on the piano keys. She played several chords, tilting her head as if she heard their song. Anyway, Lila said, "Gil's different now. He's a squatty. He works for Red Fist. The old Gil never would have." Maybe not. He was sweet. He always loved trouble, though. So sad. He's smart enough to earn a seat in the Bright. He's smarter than Dane and some of the other kids already in there. But they want to be there, and he doesn't. That's the difference. Hope tapped a black key. You can't make someone want something he doesn't. Lila kept silent, so Hope would stop going on and on about Gil. So I'm going to jump forward, and here she's going to this part of town, and she's meeting up with him. And she's committed to spy on him at this point. She rounded the curve, passing the town's last abandoned warehouse. It was quiet on this almost empty edge of town. Ahead stood a tall rectangular building with thin rectangular windows, old like the old warehouses, but brick and solid, the spice shack, and hidden inside, maybe, a shadow market. A large guy stood on the curb up ahead. He spotted her and began loping over. Gil, Lila realized. It was Gil. He stopped in front of her. His eyes were storm cloud gray, and he held his head a little tilted so she couldn't see the ruined stretch of cheek and neck. She said, "Here I am, as promised. Hey." He looked beyond her, up the street, down the street. "Hard night?" she asked. "Bluecoats are nervous." Gil grinned. "You slipped away from the beacon all right?" "Yeah, I climbed down and found Hope." "No more marks?" "Just the one." "One's not so bad," he said. She wondered how many he had, but asking felt odd, like asking about his underclothes. "I'm almost done with my shift," he said. "Then I'm going to meet up with Spinner and them." "Can I come?" "Sure, it'll be fun." How could he actually think she'd find it fun? Did he remember anything about her? "What's my favorite color?" she asked. Gil arched one slender eyebrow. "Purple blue, the color of those little flowers. What are they called?" "Nerfragouts," Lila answered. He was right. "My favorite pirate Jackman? Girl in the Tunnel." "Yeah, yours is Grounded." "Used to be. Now that's my second favorite. POW2 is the best." "POW2 is my second favorite. Definitely a close second," she said. "I almost said it was your favorite." She laughed. "Did you?" He seemed to spot something behind her. "All right, I'm done here. You ready for an adventure, Cap?" "Sure, Jack." Her hand rose to her mouth. She'd forgotten. When they played Pirate Jackman as kids, that was what she always used to say. "You certain?" "Are you suggesting I might not like an adventure, Jack?" He grinned. "My apologies. I'll consider forgiving you." Her heart was like a bird veering back and forth through her ribcage. "Where are we going?" He leaned forward on his toes. "It's a surprise," he whispered. "This way, kid." Lila laughed as she began to run. Chapter 11. As Gil led Lila up a narrow alley, Cornelia Milliner passed by the alley mouth, walking in the direction of the spice shack. Lila veered into the darkest side of the lane. "I know her." "Oh yeah? Why are you hiding?" Gil whispered, one side of his mouth quirked upward. "You scared to be seen with me, kid?" As she said, "If Cornelia sees us, she'll ask what we're doing." Something seemed to crack open inside of her, a long shut, forgotten doorway. Gil had asked her this exact same question once before, when they were 11. After his family had fallen onto Digger Street, his clothes had gotten dirtier, he'd stopped bringing any midday food to school. He started to look like Digger Street kids. except worse because of the wasteland covering half his face and neck. Most of the girls kept away from him, and Lila sometimes did too. One day, he jokingly asked, "You scared to be seen with me?" And she said, "I'm not scared. It's just my other friends don't talk to me much when I'm with you. You know, because of your face." The words hadn't seemed mean to her at the time, but Gil hadn't responded, and after that, she now realized he hadn't really spoken to her much. She'd rarely seen him at school. He didn't seem to be thinking of these things now. He was simply sneaking down the alley. His shoulder was higher than the top of her head, and though the good half of his face was nearest her, even this more reassuring side was wind-roughened, his cheek a little sunken, as though he never got quite enough to eat. "Do you think I should be scared of you?" she whispered, only half joking. "Maybe. Did get myself tattooed." "Pardon?" she asked, startled. He laughed. "On my arm. You want to guess what it is?" Her guess, not saying it, a red fist. "Well, you want to know what it is or not? Knowing might be dangerous. I might have to kill you after I show you." She smiled. "You go around killing people every time you pull up your sleeve?" "I'll consider sparing you." Gil shoved his sleeve up to his elbow and held his forearm out, the left arm, not the one the blue coats usually marked. The tattoo was hard to see in the dimness, but she could tell it wasn't a fist. At first, she thought it was an elongated diamond. The narrow top and bottom angles pointed, the wider side ones rounded. Then she realized the diamond was made of two halves, their broad brims outward, the brim's edges forming the diamond's outer edges, and their crowns aligned to form the diamond's center. One was black and one was brown, Pirate Jackman's hat and Lady Captain's. Lila reached to trace the inked picture, but then, suddenly aware of his bare forearm, she dropped her hand. "I've never seen one like that." "Yeah?" Gil sounded pleased. "I designed it." "It's great." There was something better to say, but she couldn't think of it. "It's so great," she repeated. "Where's this adventure you promised?" He looked away a moment, smiling slightly like he used to when he thought up a new scheme. "I'm going to stop somewhere first." "Where?" "Somewhere." Obviously, Gil still loved surprises. He started off. "Come on." She flew after him like she used to, unsure where they were going or what they'd find when they got there, as if he were leading her to a rock ledge to look over, or a tree to climb, or a waterfall to stand in, water slipping through her hair and down her shoulders. Gil turned sharply into a lane between two leaning warehouses. One had the newer blue coat broadsheet with the watching eye, "We will find you." Another said, "Marks for your peace of mind." Across Marks was painted, "I'm a slag." Gil grinned over his shoulder at Lila. Then he took a couple of long steps, pulled open a side door far shorter than he was, and bent low to get through. He disappeared. "Gil," she whispered as loud as she could. He didn't answer. She folded her arms to keep them from touching the walls, and she walked down the lane. She paused and listened. No sound at all. Steeling herself, she stooped and went through the small doorway. Before her, within tall, charred walls that ended several stories up, lay a wide expanse of snow and trees. The warehouse roof was gone. Long trunks stretched toward the sky, crooked branches pointing to the winter-blanched sun. "See," Gil said. He put one hand on a smooth white trunk. Underneath the snow's a lot of broken tile and concrete. The wood grew up through the cracks. Slender trunks swayed slightly, and branches reached for the vast expanse of indigo. The tree nearest to Lila had white bark with strips that had pulled free and hung in ringlets. Their undersides were pale orange. She slid off a glove and ran her fingers along the ringlets' pale orange softness. Wind rattled boughs and last summer's dried out vines which clung to the brick walls. The freighted red bricks had cracked in places, but none had come completely apart. Boards covered every single window. Outside, passers-by would see an old shell of a warehouse, but no trees, only 4 stories of solid walls. Lila rested against a trunk. Here, no one was peering at her. Gil came over and actually sat in the snow not far from her feet. He leaned back and stretched his legs out. He lowered his head onto one folded arm, his face to the sky. There was a space beside him, on his good side, her space. When they were kids, she'd lain in it a million times, her shoulder near his shoulder, her head touching his head. That space was warm. She had room to lie down inside it, one foot tucked around the other. She'd always fit. That space was too close to him now. That space didn't belong to her anymore. Lila draped her arm around the tree next to her and pressed the side of her face against its chill. Gil let out a long exhale, a white smoky cloud. This is the only place I don't feel watched. Yeah? He laughed. I'm telling you, now that you're marked, the bluecoats will always be squinting at you, and red fists will spy on you. Even if you're just working for yourself, taking on jobs and getting paid, even if you're not trying to earn a tattoo, they'll spy on you to see if you're a good recruit, or if you're stepping on a line. You'll have to get used to it, the spying. She had this crazed urge to laugh. But here, he swept his free arm through the air. I can say anything, do anything. Lila hugged the tree so tightly, its bark dug into her cheek. No one will see me, he said. Except me, she warned. He laughed again. Yeah, and you'll run right off to Red Fist, report to them all about the way I lie in the snow. I'd never spy for Red Fist, or for peace officers, she should say. See? She looked up toward the indigo sky and its white glitters. I'm not even looking at you. Not looking at me is definitely easier than looking, he remarked. It's not what I meant. Really? Sounded dubious. I meant I'm not spying on you. This lie stuck in Lila's throat. She stared at the sky. You aren't a liar, Cap. Gil's voice was joking, but it cut at her too. That's why you're such a good friend. The wind blew down inside her coat collar, an icy breath against her throat. She said, it's a little cold. Yeah, he agreed. He didn't say, sit over here, we might warm up. And she didn't say it either.
Oh no, I'm not as tall as Laura. Hello. Hello, I'm Aislinn. I'm a second semester writing for young people's student. I want to begin this introduction with a few words that Anne wrote when she was just 8 years old. She said, I don't know if just saying that I'm a writer means that I am, but I'm a writer. I think everyone in this room can benefit from Anne's childhood wisdom. Anne Gaughen writes primarily young adult fantasy novels about fierce young women disguised as men wielding illegal magics and fighting for what they believe in. Anne uses her fiction to break stereotypes and represent women from many angles. In an interview several years ago, Anne said that fantasy is a reflection of our modern understanding of culture and identity, and that art is the way that we create change. Anne is the author of the Elemente series and the Scarlet Trilogy. Anne is also a staunch feminist, championing women's issues and using her platform to advocate for equity in fiction to fight for women writers to be recognized. Anne served as the director of the Girls Leadership for the nonprofit Boston's GLOW, which stands for Girls Leadership Organized Women, as well as the co-director for Kindling Words East, a retreat for professional writers, illustrators, and editors. One of the most incredible things about being a student here at Solstice is getting to see glimmers of my own dreams within the successes and writings of the authors that I've been privileged to meet within this program. Between Anne's writing and her commitment to social action and her struggle with disability, there are so many facets of Anne's life. that felt to me like looking through a window into the future of what is possible for myself and all of the other students in this room. To conclude with more of Anne's wisdom from the acknowledgements section of her novel, Reign the Earth, for writers everywhere, never give up on a story that you want to tell. You may not know how to tell it just yet, but don't ever believe that you don't know how to tell it, period. We learn craft and practice our skills to get better at this. And now, without further ado, please welcome Anne Gaughen. Nope, that was the whole sting.
First of all, that was incredibly unfair. You can't make me tear up right before I'm supposed to start. But thank you for that incredible introduction. Where did you just go? There you are. Thank you so much. I mean, first of all, just to have done that amount of research, and I mean, I think that's truly one of the most amazing gifts that you can give someone else is to make them feel seen. So thank you. I am going to read tonight from this book. This is my fifth book. It's my most recent publication, and it's also a book that came out not terribly long before the pandemic. So I'm not actually positive that I have ever really read aloud from this book. I think I toured on this book, all correctly. But they'd never, I was touring with other people, and we were all sort of like, we spent most of the time joking and answering questions, and none of us wanted to read our books because that was weird and scary. And so I was debating for a long while of what to read, because I think there's some, there's some scenes that I love and some scenes that my darlings, my babies, all that sort of stuff. But when it came down to it, I think my favorite part of every book is the beginning. So it may be, I don't know, a little obvious, I have no idea. I don't really know what people are supposed to read. But I'm going to read you the beginning because I like it and I have a microphone in front of my face. You're just going to have to listen. So, and speaking of which, in terms of listening, there is a tiny, tiny little bit of violence, and there are also mentions of slavery, because this book is very, very much about slavery and kind of systems of oppression in general. So just be advised. Pirates, I called, aim for the skies. Behind me, Orion Bast knew what that meant, and a heavy black sailcloth fell over the name Ancora carved into my stern. I reached out with my power, securing the lines on the bottom of the cloth to cleats on the side. Annika, I called. Right here, Captain, she said. She was 10 and came up to my shoulder, but she was the only other air power I had on board. Oh, I should probably explain that. People who can control the natural elements are referred to as elementae. And yeah, I think that's the only thing you would have known about this book before you started reading it at this point. So we'll go from there. She took a deep breath and held out her palms, and I put mine under them. I could feel the threads that united everything in the natural world, connecting my power to hers, to water, to earth, to fire. The threads trembled for me, waiting for a command from their captain, the way everything else did. I pushed, and the threads unfurled, splitting and multiplying to fasten to Annika's power and splice ours together. This wasn't something she could do on her own yet, maybe ever. The deck lurched, the bow lifting upward like we were cresting a tall wave, but we never came down, my power and Annika's pushing up the sails, sliding under the hull, using the threads of the natural world to raise the ship up out of the water. I heard the telltale sound of water streaming off us as we left the ocean altogether, flying. The relentless tattoo of my heartbeat accelerated in triumph as we sailed higher, propelled by nothing but the will of two small girls, bending the natural world to our command. Annika trembled with concentration, but the thrill of power rushed through my veins, feeding me, egging me on. They'll be there, I told myself. This time, they'll be there. I wasn't sure if my brother and sister would be considered children still. Griffin would be 16, Para would be 14. But it was a stone I hadn't turned yet, and that, more than anything, was why I was a damn fool for returning to Liatos. They nearly caught us last time, Navia reminded me low in my ear. We're far enough away from the harbor, I countered. We were down the southern coast of Liatos, a few miles from the communes, in the Oculus, where I'd almost lost a crewmate and the whole damn ship last time we were here. We're not losing anyone else, she said, and I wasn't sure if it was a promise or a question. I looked over at Ori, but he had been the first to vote for this plan. No one knew who I was searching for here, but we all knew Ori was hoping to find his twin sister Dara alive and well. I couldn't imagine that an enemy Elementa had lasted very long in the hands of the trifecta. Last time it had been the moon that had given us away. We had already waited 2 days for the darker night, lurking outside the harbor where we couldn't be seen, but our supplies wouldn't have lasted. We had to risk it or return to Cyrus empty-handed, and we lost Dara and nearly our lives for that mistake. Tonight, the sky was dark and clouded, the moon only a sliver behind the clouds, a strong easterly wind filling our sails, perfect for my purposes. The communes here sat higher up on the cliff, so there were no guards or protection for me. Guiding my ship, which had stopped dripping water, I went first for the enclosure that I'd heard was full of children. They never used to guard their slaves at night, but I expected that might have changed after our last engagement, and I had to be prepared. I tightened my belt, heavy with crossbow bolts and a few knives. I looked to Bast, armed with several knives and a large sword on his hip. See you in the skies, Aspasia, Bast told me with a grin. See you in the skies, I responded. Steady, I told Annika. She took a deep breath and I eased my power away from hers. The ship trembled in the air, but drew to a halt, the wood creaking as we held still, the air curling in circles around the hull to hold it aloft, as the sails luffed gently without the forward propulsion. I nodded to Bast, grabbed a long line, and jumped off the edge of the ship with him. The air flew through my clothing and the long, heavy ropes of my hair as we fell. I was invincible, master of the sky and air, and none could dare defy me, hurt me, enslave me. I looked over at Bast as I slowed our descent, and his smile was vicious and eager. Slaves no longer, here we became the masters. We landed softly in one of the gray stone-walled communes, each a large, dismal cell all its own, leaving the lines hanging behind us. No one knew we were here yet. I signaled Bast to stop, and I sent a gentle puff of air like an exhalation, searching through the enclosure, feeling along the threads into the dark building. There were long lines of beds with small bodies in them, and at the end of the room, a man sat upright, dozing but not fully asleep, probably a guard. I tested objects with my power. Something round and hard on the floor was either a stone or a heavy pot, and I lifted it, sending it slamming into the guard's face. It landed, and he fell as I walked into the room. Pain would always precede my entrance, and it followed too in my wake, my ever-faithful shadow. A few of the children heard the noise, waking but staying in their beds, staring at me, not knowing if this shape in the darkness was devil or savior. I could take 6. It was an impossible task every time, and Bast made some of my decisions for me by plucking 2 children close to the door. Quickly, I stalked the length of the room, hoping, as always, that I'd see some kind of recognition in someone's face. The truth was, I had no idea if I'd recognize my siblings if I ever found them. So I searched the only other way I knew how and sent my power rushing through the room, feeling for the spark that would indicate another Elementa. There wasn't any, and my heart sank. So I called, "We can take 4 more. Who's coming with us?" There was a moment where no one moved. Then, like they agreed on it, several leaped from their beds. A boy pleaded with another boy not to leave, but he shook out of the other's grasp and came with me. Outside, the crew lowered the rowboat by ropes, and we stuffed it full of children. 6, but there was one more trying to climb in, so I took 7. I pushed the boat up until my crew felt it, and then they hauled it in by the lines, lifting the boat full of fear-faced children into the sky. Bast and I took the loose hanging lines, and I pointed towards the port wall, left wall. I hated that even the words changed when I was on land. Bast took a rope and wound the line around his wrist, and I called the air to twine one around me as well. We started running at the wall, and I leveraged the air and the tension of the rope to swing us up and over, using the momentum to launch us into the next enclosure. Bast and I landed quietly, letting go of the lines. He drew his sword, and I pushed back my leathers to expose the row of crossbolts at my waist. I didn't need the bow. I was the bow. There were 2 buildings in this larger enclosure, and my heart pounded with the unknown. We had up to 6 slots for men, and this was by far the more difficult part. Quick and quiet, I reminded Bastion in a whisper. He licked his lips. This one first, he said, pointing his knife at the first building. I sent my power searching out ahead of us, using where the air broke to sense walls, bars, beds, sleeping bodies that would feel a breeze on their faces. Both are full of locked cages, no guards, but I imagine they're close. He cast his watchful eyes around the enclosure. Lead the way. We moved forward quickly, going into the first building. Unlike when we raided the enclosures with the children, we had no expectation these men would come easily. Navia and Ori came in behind us, which meant that the rowboat was lowered down and ready to be filled. I searched with my eyes and power along the walls, finding a large ring of keys. As soon as the keys shivered in my hand, the men inside began to take notice. Who are you? Someone's here. We're going to be free. You're not going to be free, I snarled. But you will be taken out of here if I lick the look of you. I stalked down the center aisle, flipping through the keys. I'd been through the communes enough to know roughly the kind of key that would open the doors, and I narrowed it down to 3. Navia, Bast, and Ori flanked me as I found the first person I'd take. He was a large, scarred man who would fetch a fortune at the market. Open that door, little girl, he growled at me, and see what's waiting if you think you can enslave me. The lock clicked on the second key, and he charged the door as I stepped clear, pulling the keys away. I used my power to trip him, and it was all Bast and Ori needed to tie him up with rope and blindfold him as Navia leaped over him to the next cell with me. We had 2 more slaves secured when I heard an oily voice from deeper in the building. Might I volunteer? I could use a change of scenery. With a chuckle, I went to the voice to find a lanky man leaning against his cell door. A change of scenery, I repeated. He agreed. The trifecta is so dull this time of year. His voice had a lilt to it that I couldn't quite place. Very well, I said. I'm still tying you up. Promises, he murmured. But when I opened the door, he turned around and presented his hands behind his back so we could bind him. I had just finished tying a blindfold on him when I heard a brutal roar from outside. Hells, I growled, dragging the volunteer with me as I ran to the doorway. Handled, Bass snapped, nodding to a slave who was slumped over in his seat. Then an alarm bell started ringing hard and loud. Faster, I yelled at my crew. Ori and Navia dashed back into the cells, and I looked around for the door to this enclosure. I found it, shoving the air against it hard to block it. The ship above us jerked, and I could feel Annika's power waning. Fast, I started, and he ran forward, jamming a knife into the ground in front of the door as bodies heaved against it. Hurry, I told him, and he nodded to me. We ran back inside, and Ori and Navia had 1 more slave trussed and ready. I've got it, Bass told me as Navia tossed him the keys. Get back to the boat as soon as you can, I ordered. No one's getting left behind tonight. I didn't wait to see their reaction. I went outside to the door, and my breath tangled in my chest. The heavy iron-reinforced door was starting to smoke, glowing red from the center where a black circle was developing. The circle grew wider, and ash fell out of the door. In its place, I saw a young man standing there, his face sweaty and intense, his eyes finding mine as he continued to burn the door down. Elementa. No, the trifecta did not employ Elemente. They killed them, murdered them, and made it a holy feast day. But here was a young man using his power to burn through a door to get to me. I glanced over my shoulder. Navia and Ori were crossing the enclosure with the last slave, and Bass jogged over to me with his sword drawn. Get on the boat, I snarled. I'll take care of myself. He hesitated, and I nearly paid for it as an arrow flew out of the hot ashen void in the door. Go, I bellowed, and this time he obeyed. More arrows came at me, but I flung them away with my power like swatting flies. Then the water came and cooled the ash, and 4 guards stepped carefully through the ruins of the door. Backed up, but the guards didn't chase me. Between the guards with their shiny steel were 3 people who didn't belong. They weren't in chains, they weren't in armor. One was a girl my own age, another was a man, another was a woman older than me. The girl held up her hands, and the white stones in the enclosure started to rip up, tearing a straight line towards me. There was no way in any number of hells that I would be captured again, not by one of my own kind, for certain. I whipped out a line to catch me, wrapping around my wrist and jerking me upward like I was flying. A trail of fire and a guttural yell followed me, but only me. My crew and captives were halfway up to the ship, and I just needed to distract the Elemente a little longer. Enough arrows were lying around now that I didn't even need to use up my bolts, and I picked up the discarded weapons with my power, hurling them at the guards faster and with more precision than a bowman. The guards broke formation to cover themselves, distracting their elemente for precious seconds. The rowboat inched higher. A ball of water flew at me, tracking me better than I expected, and slammed me in the chest. I was almost 30 feet in the air and I fell. The water pressed hard on my body, not breaking, slamming me down to the earth. But my power had always reacted to me. It listened to me, reacting first to my emotions and second to my conscious commands. So before my bones shattered against the white stone ground, my power stopped me, cushioning me and blasting the water off my chest. Someone gasped, but I didn't have a moment to care. The line grabbed my wrist again, and using all the focus I could muster, I pushed the ship off hard in the air, flying high as the ship moved forward. I heard yelps from above. My crew was used to this. They would recover. A blast of fire nicked my ankle, but then I was out of range, trailing behind my ship as it raced full sail for the ocean. I lowered the ship onto the surface of the ocean with a satisfying crash, dunking myself in the water behind it. I let water fill my ears and used the sudden quiet to suck in a deep breath before my head went totally underwater. The trifecta had elemente working for them. I'd heard for months now about the sick experiments going on in the trifecta, which were terrifying enough. But if they were employing elemente to fight for them, it meant I might not be able to return to these shores to find my family. Damn it all.
All right, can we have one more round of applause for Meg, Laura, and Andy?